Many teachers all throughout history have taught us very valuable lessons, and some of the most profound teachers are those considered spiritual teachers because they last through many different generations. They have all these organizations behind them, they have all these cultures built behind them, and these are individuals like Jesus or Buddha or some of like the Muslim figures and Hinduism, and you have all these different types of religions, some that many people have not even heard of. Taoism is one that I talk about quite often on my channel. It's not even a religion, it's considered a philosophy, and some people talk about, well, is religion a philosophy? Is it a science? But in truth, it influences everything because of the truths within, or what could be found as very valuable perspective, things that help individuals within their lives. But there is a teaching among all these different spiritual teachers that goes completely ignored by the majority of the public today, and that is the truth and the golden rule. The concept of the truth is something alone, just looking at the truth, and I did a video about this recently. It says, do you actually perceive the truth? I recommend checking it out because it compares perception versus truth. It's only about 5 minutes. It's important to understand the difference because we may not ourselves perceive the truth, and we may not know the whole truth, because the whole truth is this whole world that is so much to explore, so much to understand, right? But these spiritual teachers helped us see the truth in different ways. Some of them disagreed about how to get there, how to perceive it, but they were looking at the truth nonetheless. Now, why is this important? Well, because they told us to look for the truth, but they didn't tell us to find it through politics. And this is valuable because anytime you look at people like the Buddha or Jesus, they're not saying you have to set up a government, have this system in place, have this document in place, have certain rituals. The only ritual that they tell people to do is prayer or meditation or internal practices with their own connection to the truth themselves. Internal, external practices, whatever it is, it's with supernatural forces or forces other than man, and it's man seeking that for himself. Man must do that himself. He doesn't have to ask for permission on behalf of some government, doesn't have to have some title or special dress or whatever in a certain ritual as in politics. Maybe there's certain things they can wear, long hair, for example, some people associate with religions, I don't know, right? There's different cultures and traditions for different things they wear, but it's different from a government which has its own rituals, has its own religious ideology, certain figures that must be obeyed, as opposed to these spiritual figures that ask for you to look up to their wisdom and say, hey, here's the truth, look at it, but they're not forcing you to obey. They're not using violence to make you obey. Their teachings of the truth are purely just teachings. They're not commands telling you that you must do what you're told. And so they're very different from politics, but politics tends to go a little bit into that realm when they say, I am the deity, you must follow me, and the only way you can get the truth is if you have us in place, saying that government is necessary for truth. But when did any spiritual teacher ever say that explicitly? When did they ever say there has to be a certain ritual or a certain tax upon the public? If anything, they tell us not to. Because if we look at the golden rule, which is taught in almost every single ancient tradition and religion, it says, do unto others what you would have done unto you. That's one form of it, right? And there's many other forms of it I'll put on the screen. This is important because if you wouldn't personally steal money from your neighbors, what makes it right for you to have a gang or a government do that on your own behalf? If it's wrong for you to do it and you wouldn't do it, what makes it right for these other people to do it? Just because they're authority, just because they're cops, just because they have written on some piece of paper? It doesn't change the nature of reality. And never again did these spiritual teachers say there's an exception to morality through legality. They never said legality is the way to the truth. They said enlightenment. They said meditation. They said, shadow work by Carl Jung, essentially. Being able to look through all the fears, look through all the attachments, being able to discern in your life, being able to evolve personally and spiritually, which is something most people in politics don't even mention or talk about, let alone even being an option. They don't even consider it. They say, in order to change the world, we have to pass a law. We have to write it on a piece of paper. So this is a big deal because most people in the world are partaking in politics, and even the people who don't care just go along with it because they think it's necessary. But when was it ever necessary? When was it ever explicitly said to be necessary? Or were you only taught that it was necessary through the schooling system? The schooling system developed by man, which also isn't really a religious or spiritual tradition or education. And some of it might be, but then if you look at that, why does government enter the equation? Why does man's rule come into the equation? If morality is the rules and it's already present and we can teach it to one another, then why do we need some piece of paper saying this is right? If right is inherent within the universe, then why do we have to write it on some piece of paper just to assure it? Okay, so then it's a recommendation. But to say that this is right, and if you don't do so, you're going to be punished by however we think it should be done for everybody, this is how the whole world should work, it's sort of like man taking the place of God, man taking the place of these spiritual teachers saying, I get it, they wanted to teach you, they have these ideals, and they want other people to teach that, but we have to be the ones to teach. We have to be the ones, and not to teach, but to dictate and say this is how much things must work, and you must believe in our power that we have the right to tell you that this is how things must work, and if you don't, well, we have the right to also take your life, your property, or whatever we arbitrarily choose on our whim. And for them to have that power makes them seem so powerful. Like they're a god, like they have control over your life and property. I mean, you can call that slavery if you want. I would call it slavery, a master-slave relationship, but I wouldn't call them an actual master. Like in Eastern traditions, they say there's this master because he's actually a master of the elements. He's a master of what he does. Like he's actually someone worth emulating, worth following. These are masters saying, oh, I have this right to rule. I was voted in by these people, even though you didn't consent, and therefore you must consent because you have no choice. You have to. That's not really consent because you didn't want to, but you had no choice. So this is the world we live in. We live in contradiction with ourselves. We do something that we know is wrong because it's following orders. Or we live under a system of government that we never consented to, but we do it because we were told to do it because everyone else is doing it. So of course we're unaligned with our spiritual principles. But how often do people in spirituality talk about this? So now I have two distinctions that I have made. People in politics ignore spirituality, and people in spirituality completely ignore politics. And yet they should be connected in the fact that politics is basically irrelevant in light of spirituality, but without seeing the two in presence of each other, you can't make that discernment. You're just ignoring one. Politics ignoring spirituality, spirituality ignoring politics. But they're both in this reality because people are consuming so much of their time and energy into these, and they have for thousands of years. The same way people consume so much of their time and energy into slavery for thousands of years. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean that everybody should do it. Just because everybody thought it was productive and necessary for society does not mean it should be something that everybody does. So let's look at the truth, let's use these practices, let's evolve the individual, which must utilize these practices, It's not like we can just say, well, on behalf of the individual, we'll do it for them. No, they have to go through their own enlightenment process. This is why every individual in spiritual traditions needs to go through that process, that they can't have someone else do it for them. Okay, so if we're doing that, then we're looking at the individual, and if we're respecting their own morality and their own consent, then we would not rule over them. We would not dictate over their lives. We would let them be. We would live and let live. We would do no harm. These are all just other ways and other spiritual traditions and wisdoms that have also been passed alongside the Golden Rule. So it's all very important, and I'm going to share with you guys resources. Check out the description and the questions on the screen. I want you to think about these questions, because this will help you think for yourself. Whether you're religious or not, it doesn't matter. Spiritual teachings can be considered teachings of truth because they're looking at this higher reality, or the higher laws, or the natural laws within the universe. Something that everybody can understand if they have a conscience or any sense of empathy or care for another individual. Okay, and that's all I ask. Spirit just means breath. Being able to breathe, be present, and see what's going on in the world. That's it. That's all I ask you to do. I want humans to remain human, to remain of their breath, to remain of one another, of their humanity, because they should not be robots just following orders and just doing what they're told and going overseas killing people they don't know. I'm done with that, and I think if humanity wants to evolve, they can get past all those barbaric practices that have been done for so long. Just because they were done for so long does not make it right. We can evolve just as we ended chattel slavery not even 200 years ago. But don't forget that we had World War II, not just happened just within the last 50 years. Okay? That's a big deal. That wasn't so long ago at all. Both of those events not so long ago. Okay, so let's understand that and move forward with personal evolution, taking it for ourselves and saying, what is it that I should think about? Should I think about this thing that people fear so often, which is freedom? Because if they fear it, then they'll never achieve it. Perhaps we have to embrace it, but how do we embrace it? Well, how did the slave free themselves? They control themselves. How do they control themselves? They gain mastery over themselves. They become their own master. They learn, they educate themselves. That's an evolution. How often do people want to be teachers or educators? It's much easier to just run for office. It's much easier to just pass a law, write it down on a piece of paper. But how much harder is it to teach an individual? To get them to understand their own reality, to see themselves past all the illusions, all the darkness that they bound themselves into for so much of their life, all the traumas and abuses they have to get past, all the programming that they were set upon all throughout their youth. This is all the matter of spiritual evolution. At least that's in my view. And I have a video talking about spirituality versus religion. Feel free to check that out. Thank you very much for watching. This is Corey Angela. Nature is the answer.